The day my grandmother gave me that envelope, my uncle laughed so hard he had to set down his champagne. It was my cousin's rehearsal dinner. The whole family had gathered at my aunt's house, the big one, the one with the wraparound porch and the kitchen that always smelled like cardamom and burnt sugar. My grandmother had asked to say a few words before dessert, which wasn't unusual. She was 81 and she loved an audience. What was unusual was that she pulled me aside first. She found me in the hallway near the coat closet, the one spot in the house where you could breathe without bumping into a relative. She pressed an envelope into my hands. It was thin, cream-colored, the kind of envelope you'd mail a birthday card in. My name was written on the front in her handwriting, the big looping letters she'd always used, the ones that looked almost childish if you didn't know her. "Keep this," she said. "Don't open it tonight." "Grandma, what is?" "Not tonight." She squeezed my hand once, hard, the way she always did when she meant something. Then she walked back into the dining room like nothing had happened. I stood there holding that envelope, and I didn't know what to do with it, so I put it in my coat pocket and went back to the table. That's when my uncle made his announcement. He stood up. My mother's older brother, the one who'd built a real estate business from scratch and never let anyone forget it. And he said that Grandma had decided to finalize some things. Estate things. Given her age. He said it the way people say given her age when they don't want to say the actual word. He said that he and my aunt would be taking over management of her accounts, her property, everything. To make things simpler, to take the burden off her. Grandma sat at the head of the table and smiled. She didn't say anything. My uncle looked at me exactly once during that whole speech. It was the kind of look that isn't really a look, it's a dismissal. I was 29 years old. I taught second grade. I drove a 10-year-old Honda. I was not, in my uncle's estimation, someone who needed to be spoken to directly about matters of substance. After he sat down, my cousin, the one whose rehearsal dinner this was, leaned over and whispered that I shouldn't worry about it. "It's just paperwork," she said. She meant to be kind. She had no idea what any of it meant either. Later that night, after everyone had left, after I'd driven the 40 minutes back to my apartment and changed into sweatpants and sat down on my bathroom floor for reasons I still can't fully explain, I opened the envelope. It was a single sheet of paper. A letter, handwritten. 3 pages folded into thirds. And a business card clipped to the top. A lawyer's name. An address downtown. And at the bottom of the first page, in my grandmother's handwriting, "Call him Monday. Tell him I sent you. Don't tell your uncle. I need to go back." My grandmother raised 4 children in a house that my grandfather built with 2 other men and a lot of borrowed equipment. My grandfather died when I was 6. I have 3 memories of him: the smell of his jacket, the sound of his laugh, and a photograph on her mantel where he's squinting into the sun with his hand raised like he's trying to block the camera. After he died, my grandmother kept the house. She kept the garden. She kept her Friday card games and her Sunday calls with her sister in Ohio. She did not, as far as anyone could tell, fall apart. My mother was the youngest of her 4 children. My uncle was the oldest. There had always been something unspoken between them. Some old score, some early wound, that I only understood in pieces as I got older. My uncle had expected to be given the house when my grandfather died. My grandmother had not given it to him. She had not given it to anyone. She kept it. I was the grandchild who visited most. I don't say that to make myself sound virtuous. The truth is, I lived nearby and I liked her. I liked sitting in her kitchen while she made tea. She didn't drink and talked about things that had nothing to do with me. She'd tell me about the winter of 1987 and the neighbor who kept peacocks and the time she drove to Canada by herself because she wanted to see Niagara Falls before she died. She'd been in her 50s then. She lived another 30 years. She never talked about money. Not once in my entire life did she bring up money directly. Which is why, sitting on my bathroom floor at midnight with a lawyer's business card in my hand, I felt something shift in my chest. Like a drawer I hadn't known existed had just slid open. I called the lawyer Monday. His name was Mr. 2. Callahan. He sounded about 70 on the phone, dry and precise. The kind of voice that belongs to someone who has heard every variety of human mess and is no longer surprised by any of it. He asked me to come in Wednesday morning. I took a half day from school. His office was on the fourth floor of a building downtown that smelled like carpet cleaner and old paper. His assistant offered me coffee I didn't drink. And then Mr. Callahan came out, shook my hand, and said, "Your grandmother has been my client for 31 years. I said I didn't know that. She didn't advertise it, he said. He sat across from me at a round table, not a desk, which I noticed, a folder in front of him. He didn't open it immediately. He asked me a few questions first. How well did I know her finances? Had she spoken to me about her wishes? Did I understand what the term revocable trust meant? I said I understood it roughly. He nodded. He opened the folder, and then he told me that my grandmother had, over the course of 50 years, quietly accumulated a portfolio of assets that included 3 rental properties in the county, a brokerage account, and a trust fund that she'd established in 1989, the year my grandfather died. The total value of the trust was just over $2.3 million. I heard the number, I understood each individual word, but the sentence didn't process. I sat there looking at Mr. Tend, Callahan's folder, and I think I said something like, "I'm sorry, can you, 2.3 million, he said again, with the patience of someone who has delivered surprising numbers to surprised people for a long time. The trust names you as the primary beneficiary. Her 4 children each receive the property on Dunmore Street and a smaller cash bequest. The bulk of the estate passes to you." The room was very quiet. "Why me?" I asked. He looked at me over his glasses. "She said you were the only one who visited because you wanted to, not because you wanted something." I did not tell my uncle. I went back to school. I taught long division and the water cycle and how to sound out words that don't follow the rules. I went to my grandmother's house on Friday for card games like I always did, and I sat across from her and watched her shuffle the deck with the efficiency of someone who has never once in her life done anything slowly. "Did you go see him?" she asked without looking up. "Yes." "Good." She dealt the cards. "Don't make any decisions right away. Just let it sit." "Grandma." I put my hand on the table. "Those properties. The brokerage account. Where did that come from?" She looked up then. "Your grandfather left me 1 property and some savings. I bought a second one in 1994. I sold it in 2001 and bought 2 more. I've had the same financial advisor for 26 years. She said it matter-of-factly, the way she would describe a recipe. Add the flour slowly. Keep the heat low. I didn't talk about it because it was nobody's business." "Did my mom know?" "No." "Did Uncle?" "No." She picked up her cards and looked at them. "Your uncle assumes that women of my generation kept money in a coffee can." She almost smiled. I let him assume. The legal process took 4 months. During those 4 months, I went to work and graded papers and called my mom on Sundays and did not say anything. The weight of not saying anything was its own thing. Not heavy exactly, but present. Like carrying something fragile. My grandmother stayed in her house. She played cards on Fridays. She watched the news and complained about it. She was sharp and careful and almost exactly herself. Except that sometimes, when I was leaving, she'd hold my hand a second longer than usual. In March, my uncle called me. He'd found out. I don't know exactly how. Lawyers are careful. But families have ways of learning things. He was not calm. He told me that our grandmother was elderly and had clearly been taken advantage of. He used the phrase undue influence. He said he intended to contest the estate. He said I needed to understand that this wasn't personal. I let him finish. Then I said, "She built this over 50 years. She chose who to leave it to. I think you should talk to your own lawyer before you make any decisions." He hung up. My hands were shaking. I sat on my couch for a long time afterward, in the particular silence of an apartment at night, and I thought about my grandmother driving alone to Niagara Falls in the 1980s because she wanted to see it before she died. I thought about her keeping a lawyer for 31 years without telling anyone. I thought about 1989, the year my grandfather died, the year she established the trust. How she had been grieving, and she had also been building. He did contest it. It went on for 7 weeks. I won't go through all of it. What I will tell you is that Mr. Callahan was very good at his job, and that my grandmother had been very thorough about hers. Every purchase documented, every decision dated. 31 years of paperwork, all of it in order. My uncle's claim was dismissed. The week it was settled, I drove to my grandmother's house on a Wednesday. Not a Friday, not our usual time. And I sat in her kitchen and she made tea neither of us drank. And I told her it was over. She nodded. She didn't look surprised. He thought I was simple, she said. Not bitter. Just stating it. A lot of people did. It made things easier. I don't understand how you kept it secret for so long. She thought about that for a moment. I didn't keep it secret. I kept it private. There's a difference. I didn't lie to anyone. I just didn't explain myself to people who wouldn't have understood anyway. She looked at me. Your grandfather used to say I was the quietest person he'd ever met, who still always got exactly what she wanted. I laughed. It surprised me, the laugh coming out before I could decide whether the moment called for one. She almost smiled again. The properties are in good shape. You'll want to meet with the property manager. And don't let the financial advisor talk you into anything complicated in the first year. Just let it sit. Grandma. I didn't know what I was going to say until it was coming out. Why didn't you ever tell me? Even a hint? She was quiet for a long moment. Because you would have visited differently, she said. And I liked the visit. I still teach 2nd grade. People ask me sometimes. Not many people, because not many people know whether I changed everything. Quit my job. Moved somewhere. Bought things. The truth is, I bought a used car that wasn't 10 years old. I started a fund for my students to get books they want to keep, not just borrow. I met with the property manager. I took my mom to see the Grand Canyon because she'd always wanted to and never gone. My grandmother died 14 months after that Wednesday kitchen visit. She was 82. She died in her own house, which was what she wanted, with the garden she'd kept for 50 years outside the window. At the estate distribution, which was small and formal, and my uncle attended only briefly, with a lawyer. He looked at me across the table with an expression I'd seen before but couldn't name until I was driving home afterward. It wasn't anger, it wasn't grief. It was the look of someone who had spent a long time deciding what another person was worth, and had turned out to be wrong. I thought about my grandmother in 1989, the year she started building something no one could see. I thought about 30 years of Fridays, of card games, of tea neither of us ever drank. I thought about how she'd pressed that envelope into my hands and said not tonight with the calm of someone who had already thought through everything that came next. She knew. She had always known. She just let people decide for themselves what she was, and then she got on with the work. I've thought a lot about what my grandmother actually did. Not the money, not the properties, not the brokerage account. What she did was decide, early and quietly, that she wasn't going to let other people's assumptions become her reality. That's a harder thing than it sounds. Most of us, when someone decides we're small, start to believe them a little. We shrink to fit the space they've assigned us. My grandmother did the opposite. She let my uncle think whatever he wanted about women of her generation, and coffee cans and limited understanding. And then she spent 30 years proving him wrong in a room he didn't even know existed. That's not luck. That's a choice made over and over again, in small increments, across decades. I think about the version of her sitting in a lawyer's office in 1989, the year my grandfather died, setting up a trust while she was still grieving. She was doing 2 things at once that most people can barely manage separately: holding her loss and building her future. That kind of discipline doesn't come from being fearless. It comes from being very clear about what you value and refusing to let the noise around you drown it out. My uncle's mistake wasn't greed exactly. It was a failure of imagination. He looked at my grandmother and saw what he expected to see. An elderly woman who needed managing. And he stopped looking. He never asked. He never wondered. He assumed, and the assumption cost him. I think about that a lot in my own life. How easy it is to decide we already know what something is worth. A student who's slow to read. A neighborhood that looks worn down. A person who doesn't announce themselves. We make these calls in seconds, and then we stop paying attention, and what we miss is usually the most important thing. What my grandmother gave me wasn't just the inheritance. It was the evidence that quiet, consistent effort over a long period of time builds something real. Not because the universe rewards virtue, I don't think it works that cleanly, but because sustained attention and discipline actually compound. She bought one property, then a second. Kept the same advisor for 26 years. Didn't overcomplicate it. Let it sit the way she told me to let it sit. The results weren't magic. They were math, applied with patience. And she gave me something else. Something I've had to sit with longer. She said she didn't tell me because I would have visited differently. That sentence stays with me. She was protecting something that had nothing to do with money. The realness of what we had, the Friday card games, the tea we never drank, the conversations about peacocks and Niagara Falls. She valued that enough to keep it separate from everything else. I try to carry that forward. The idea that what you build matters, and how you build it matters, and the relationships you keep clean and honest along the way matter most of all. That's not a lesson anyone taught me directly. It's something I understood only after. Sitting in a lawyer's office, hearing a number I couldn't process, thinking about an old woman who drove to Canada by herself because she wanted to see something beautiful before she died. She saw it. She lived another 30 years, and she spent every one of them exactly as she intended.